Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Believe it or not, it actually is the afternoon, not the late evening, as it may appear, because it is just actually really dark today for whatever reason. So yeah, today we are drawing Power Girl. We're doing another one of those fan favorite characters, meaning we've got to do a little bit of posing, because we're going to be doing a flying pose. Now it's a simple enough one. It's kind of barely a flying pose, but there's some tiny little bits I need to talk about posing wise there. But we're going to be talking a little bit more about lighting this time because we're going to be doing a sunset in the background. So I know I talk a lot about not wanting to do too many sunset color palettes and so on and so forth, but this time I'm going to actually work it in. So yeah, I'm going to do a sunset in the background. So we're going to talk a little bit about lighting because you get a lot more kind of intense dynamic lighting whenever you're doing obviously stuff like that. And yeah, anyways, I'll roll the intro and then I'll show you what I have. So yeah. Okay, so this is where we're at. I decided to go with the modern design. I was originally thinking about giving her classic design, but I didn't really feel like drawing a cape. For one, I didn't feel like really drawing a cape, and for two, I just feel like it's probably better to kind of stick with the newer stuff. My chair is making a lot of very loud creaking noises, so I apologize for that. Also, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little hoarse. But you're not going to be hearing me whinnying at any point during this. That was a bad joke. Anyways, moving swiftly along. Posing. So yeah, as I said, this is barely a flying pose. However, down here we've got flying pose sort of stuff going on. Because yeah, right, okay. So let's just get into it then. So in terms of how you do a flying pose for someone who isn't really posed like they're flying, like, I mean, she's not moving, that's the angle of it, of where, like, she's just sort of floating there in place. It's not like she's, like, zooming along or flying forward or even going up or anything like that, or even, like, kind of floating forward. She's just sort of hovering in place. So with that, that sort of means that we're going to have to do a little bit, some little things to sell the pose. Now, the things that you have to do are just all in the feet, really. Typically, the way I think about it is you just have to make it look like they're sort of treading water, is kind of the idea. And obviously, if someone's flying, it's significantly more effortless, generally, than if someone's swimming. If someone's like just treading water or something like that, they're typically doing a little bit more than this. But it's the kind of idea with the feet of where, in theory, if you were flying, it's somewhat similar to swimming. That's generally what the visual that people go for is. So you tend to have the feet kind of flapping a little bit to a degree, or you just have them kind of hovering in a position that's a little bit more distinct. Again, you don't want it to look like anyone's applying pressure with their feet, so you just sort of have the foot just sort of dangle. That's kind of what I have here, where they're just sort of dangling. This one's coming up a little bit, because that's, again, it's coming back a little bit, because that's just sort of how you do stuff like that with the feet in these kind of flying poses. Is you just sort of have to pose in such a way where there's a little bit of movement going on, just that it's distinct from a standing pose. Because yeah, here it doesn't. Again, it's not enormously distinct from a standing pose, aside from this. Now I think I did actually slightly. I think the design here of the jacket is maybe slightly different than how it is in the design. I don't have a picture open in front of me, so I don't know. I think a lot of the time they tend to go for a more kind of a standard sort of front to the jacket, whereas I've gone for this sort of like almost pilot thing with the jacket. I think maybe that's just part of the flying thing that I thought of. But yeah, I'm gonna have to make a little bit of an adjustment to the face, because the mouth doesn't look quite right, and I think her jaw is a little too long. I think it needs to come forward a little bit as opposed to the way it's like weirdly coming back there. Yeah, her head needs to sort of come down more into a point like that, I think. think I just need to narrow the jaw a little bit more. I think that's probably the issue. But yeah, I think the hair looks alright, so I think I don't need to change much about that. But yeah, now obviously the lighting stuff I don't need to really go over that much yet, because I'm not going to be talking about that until pretty much the very end. Because that's not going to really come in until we're doing any of the sort of painted shading or anything like that. That's whenever we're going to get into that. Now I'm going to probably position the sun like here, so it's partly like part of her is obscured. But what that would mean is that because the sun is behind her, and that will be where our intense light is, that'll mean that we're going to need, we're effectively going to be having a rim light all around this edge here. I think would be where it would be. I think maybe the sun should be over here, so the rim light is here, and then we get to have the soft light over here. That would make a bit more sense, because you normally want the soft light to hit the front. It's normally how I prefer it anyways, is have a soft light hitting the front and then have a more intense light hitting the back, just so that it's easier to see all the details, because obviously the front is where the details tend to be. So if that's the case, then yeah, the sun should probably be over here. I mean, she's centered anyway, so I can sort of just put the sun anywhere. Yeah, if I put the sun more over here or something like that, I'll have a cloud line which will be sort of kind of going up around this area. Maybe throw some clouds above here, something like that. But we're supposed to be above the clouds, so that should mean that it might be nice to have like a sort of the cloud maybe wrapping around the bottom of the leg or something like that. That might look a little bit more interesting. I think I maybe thought of doing something like that with the Supergirl one whenever I did that a little while ago. Yeah. I think I maybe thought of doing something like that. But because we're doing a sunset, that means the clouds are going to have they're going to have a different sort of gradient in color. Some of them are going to be a bit orangey, some of them are going to be a bit pinky, some of them are going to, most of them are going to be more like a salmony kind of pinky color. And then that's going to then fade into a purple as we're getting closer to the camera, because this is the darker clouds. So that means I'm going to have to do some sort of layering paints, but we'll worry about that later. Is there anything else I really need to cover? Because yeah, I think we're mostly kind of good on that. Again, as I said, I'm going to need to make some changes to the face. I'm going to need to obviously all that lighting stuff is later. I don't know, is there anything else I really need to cover? I suppose there's some proportioning things which I could maybe mention. Power Girl is normally proportioned in a very particular way, and so I try to keep to that, but it also, slightly humanize it a little bit more. So by virtue of the fact that she's normally a bit more built, I made her a bit broader in the shoulders, made her legs a bit thicker, just so that all the sort of bigger parts of her make a bit more sense physically, that it's not out of proportion. So I tried to sort of keep things more in tone with the rest of with everything else. But the sort of the larger parts do still come across as large, but not that anything's too sort of out of proportion. So yeah, again, I made her arms a little bigger and her legs a little bigger, just so that everything seems a little bit more in proportion. So that it gives it a little bit more of a natural look. It makes things look a little bit more, again, in keeping. Again, give her broader shoulders, sort of slightly, thicker shoulders, thicker legs, thicker arms, stuff like that. But yeah, the arms do taper down because the forearms here are a bit thinner. So yeah, they all do sort of taper down in that respect. Yeah, I think that's sort of everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. I think I'll probably have a bit more to say once we're doing the colors, because I'll have to do I'll be doing the background during the color section, so I think I'll have a bit more to talk about there. But yeah, anyways, I will do these details and then I'll be back to do the colors. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more then. But yeah, anyways. Okay, so that is our details done. That took a hell of a lot longer than I wanted it to. Mostly because it's been a while since I've really done any drawing, so I'm a little rusty. I think I've kind of gotten a little bit back into the hang of it, though. I've gotten the muscles a little bit worked out in my hand from the pen. Because, yeah, as I say, I haven't really been doing any drawing at all, so it feels a little alien whenever you leave it for a little too long. But anyways, as I say, I feel like I'm getting it a little bit more. But yeah, so that's our details. So now we're going to be going into the colors, which means I'm going to have to do our background. Now, I think I'm going to be doing like a late sunset. So what I mean to say is there's going to be a lot more, the sun is lower, and we're going to be dealing with a lot more sort of purple creeping in from the top and the bottom, because the cloud line will have the sort of most sort of salmony kind of orangey stuff towards the sun, and then that'll creep back in towards the camera, creating a sort of purpley effect closer. And then obviously there'll be a bit more purple, kind of blue towards the top to sort of give you that sort of thermal kind of thing creeping down in these little tiny bits as we go down the top of the page like that. But yeah, color wise, Power Girl's colors are fairly simple. I'm realizing I forgot something. I forgot to put the little symbol there. I will just keep that highlighted just so I remember. I'll do that at the start of this section because I just forgot to do that. I had a feeling I was creating something, but at least I caught it, because otherwise that probably would have gotten left there. But yeah, I forgot to do the super symbol. But yeah, that shouldn't take very long. Anyways, yeah, I did a little bit of checking because I wanted to remember what type of jacket that she normally has in this design. The normal, it actually varies a lot. Some of them do have this kind of like pilot neck on them. Obviously, it's a little shorter than this. They don't normally touch to near the shoulders where I have them. I mean, these they do touch the shoulders, the parts of the collar there. Sometimes it's drawn as sort of like a biker jacket, or where it's got the sort of the extra pieces and then the buttons and the zip. But it varies wildly, so that's not too important. I did keep the there's a red seam on the gloves, which is oddly important. I feel like I fixed the face. I'll give you an example here of what it looked like before. I wasn't a fan of how I drew that face originally, so I've just changed it, so I think her face looks a little different. The angle is a little bit more intense. As you can see here, the area where the eye is originally was fairly flat. The head was a bit flat, and it had this kind of awkward shape of where the side of the jaw wasn't quite being shown properly. It wasn't quite far enough over where you'd be just getting kind of the chin and then into the rest of the face. But that's kind of how I changed it. I angled it a little bit more. Her head kind of is over a little bit more like that. I changed the mouth as well because I wasn't happy with that either. I changed her mouth shape a little bit. It's still kind of the same thing, of where the kind of lowest part of her upper lip kind of it kind of curls up. I drew it like that. I think that looks alright. Here, mostly exactly the same. I didn't really change that at all. Again, I've mostly sort of kept my thick outline kind of thing going. This is a little hairier than I would have liked. Some of the lines around here are a little hairy. I'll probably fix those as I'm going, but yeah, you'll see what I mean anyways. But yeah. One of the other things which I wanted to mention, yes, I gave a little seam on the inside of the gloves. That was what I was thinking of there. I added that as well. There's some kind of riveting along the chain. I'm not really sure what the point of it is, especially not on the jacket. The point of it on the cape made a little bit more sense because it only connects at the one shoulder. But yeah, it's just, I suppose it's too big an element of the design to remove. But yeah, what else was I going to bring up? I don't know what it was that I was going to say. But yeah, color-wise, we've not got anything too crazy. I'm going to probably keep it kind of vivid because the sunset will, and the shading will kind of... It would be preferable to keep things vivid for the purposes of that. The blue I might make a little darker than it might normally be. Because that will... The gradient map might not like that too much. The sort of shading might fight the blue a little bit, so we'll think about that. I'll put the sun in this section, and I'll do obviously the background colors. That's probably one of the first things I'll do. I'll fix that. I'll add that bit to the shoulder, the symbol that I forgot to put in. I'll have to do I don't know if I'll do the clouds during this section because that'll be quite a bit of layering. I might do it, we'll see. I might wait to do that, but I think maybe it'd be preferable to just do it to get it out of the way with. Anyways, yeah, I think I will move on. I'll have to obviously be talking a bit more about the lighting stuff in the next section, being our painted shading. It'll be more of a focus there. But yeah, because so much of the design is white, that will actually make things a lot easier for the shading, because most shading colors don't conflict too much with white. If we're going to be using purples, it might look a little messy, but I'll clean that up with the sort of lighter colors. Anyways, that's nothing to really worry about too soon. Talk about it more whenever we get to painted shading, which is our next section. So anyways, I'll do these colors, I'll make those little adjustments that I needed to make, and then I will be back. So yeah. Alright, that is our colors and our background pretty much entirely done. So again, as I mentioned, I think I did my damnedest here to try and sell the clouds. I had to add in a little bit of extra darkness to the top here so that it really sells the sort of late sunset look. And again, you can see the sort of darker clouds kind of creeping up here, where you've got the more salmony orange kind of reddy ones up here, which sort of cloud the sun a little bit because it's falling beneath the cloud line. Yeah, so since you've got those clouds kind of, peering around and kind of encircling everything, it ends up sort of... It can be very difficult to sort of create the depth here that I want. And I don't know if that's just because I'm not amazing with paints, especially with sort of fully painted environments, because that can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you're not too used to it. But yeah, you can obviously see through the clouds in these little bits, and so you just sort of lose a little bit of that volume to them. You know what I might do at the end of this section? I might create a second cloud layer, which is just a sort of a slightly kind of denser collection of clouds. I might move the sun up a little bit. We'll see. We'll have a think about it, because I feel like it's kind of missing something. Even though I kind of like the way that the paint and color kind of flows here, the sort of creeping in and the layering of the paints. I like how that looks. I just sort of feel like I need a little bit more. I need a little bit more to it. Because yeah, the clouds are sort of lacking a bit of depth. It just feels like a sort of an effect layered onto the screen, which is literally what it is. But yeah, I just sort of feel like I need a bit more out of it. So I'll probably move the sun up a little bit, tiny bit. I might change the color of the glow on it just so it's maybe a bit redder, because it's a bit too orange, I think, for how late a sunset we're looking at. It should probably be redder. And yeah, I think that should probably do what I want in theory. But yeah, we're going to be doing a painted shading, and I'm going to be probably using a red light line here, sort of a reddy kind of orange light line. and I'll apply that to this side. Our darkest color is going to be a purple, which is also going to be applied to this side predominantly, and then our lightest is going to be a sort of an orangey color, which we'll apply over here. A sort of a soft orange, not too sharp, because yeah, our gradient maps will catch a lot of that stuff. But yeah, we're getting there in terms of time, so I want to kind of start moving a bit. So again, you'll see some of the changes that I maybe try to make here. Obviously I added the symbol on the arm, which I forgot to do before. I used sort of I had to change the red a few times. I wasn't too happy with it. I ended up coming away with something which is a fairly kind of a bit of a richer kind of red, a bit of a deeper red than I maybe would have used before. I started with a kind of very bright one, but it wasn't really sitting right with me. I felt like it needed to be a little darker. And then the blue I used is a fairly kind of a bit of a deeper blue. Again, the colors I tended to go for here were fairly deep. Aside from the gold is a fairly mild color. It's not a sort of very sharp dark color that I might have normally picked, but it's a bit of a mild color. The white obviously is a fairly bright white, but yeah, that's sort of the stuff that I tended to stick with here for the most part. I should actually probably select a color palette so that I know what I'm doing here, but I'll do that as I start. Anyways, yeah, okay. I think I'm good to probably continue. So I will do these these paints. Maybe do some changes to the background if I feel like it, which I probably will. I probably will need to change some stuff just to add a bit more depth because I feel like we're lacking that. But yeah. So anyways, I will do a little bit more with that background after I do these paints, and then I'll be back to do the detailed shading, and then the last kind of stuff like that. So yeah, anyways. Okay, so that's our painted shading. Not much to write home about there. I sort of did what I normally do. I sort of stuck to the general color palette a little bit. Made a few alterations. Gave a little bit of a sort of whitening to certain areas just so that it kind of emphasizes the shape of them a little bit. Added a little bit of a light sheen to the jacket and the gloves and the boots. The white obviously is not really much of a point in applying anything there because you're not going to really see it. I applied a little bit to the gold as well, just to give it a bit more of a metallic look. And just obviously so that she's catching a little bit more of the light. Now obviously we're probably going to be doing some very dark gradient maps, so some of that is probably going to get a little lost, but it's not too bad. But yeah, we're going to be, I think the detailed shading here is going to end up being a little more intense than I might normally go for, because I have it set to 30%. I think that's about what I normally go for in terms of the opacity on it, but we've got a dark blue as our darkest color, and a light kind of yellowy color is what we've got for our lightest. Now the reason why I've gone for blue is to sort of add a little bit more of that thermal kind of thing, because the color palette I'm going to go for is a sort of a dark blue as its darkest, and then obviously yellow as its brightest. So that is going to end up kind of nudging some of these colors in the painting here a little bit brighter and a little bit darker. So that should help with some of those little problems we were having. I did apply a second layer of clouds there, which I definitely think helps. It sort of adds a little bit more depth, even though that sits behind the sun, which obviously logically doesn't make any sense. But it looks a little better, and it allows the sun to sort of come out a little bit more. Yeah, it kind of brings out the kind of colors of the sun a little bit more there. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the gradient maps take to that because, again, as I say, they will make certain parts darker and certain parts lighter. Because a lot of this is fairly dim in the background, but our character colors are all fairly bright. So that'll probably get darker, whereas some of the background stuff might get lighter. Because, yeah, this section now, I've got to do the detailed shading, I've got to do the light line, which, as I said before, will be a sort of a reddy-orange color, I think. And then I will also be doing my first gradient map, and since I have a color palette already selected, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's much more I need to go over. As I say, I moved the sun up a little bit. It was very low before. I brought it up, and then I made the second sort of cloud layer. I kind of redid all my painting here, where I kind of feathered it a bit more, so I think it looks a little bit more cloudy than it did before. Like, we turn that off. I mean, yeah, that's what the second layer looks like without anything over it. But yeah, there is definitely a sort of a dimmer kind of look to it now. But yeah, the sort of bottom is a lot darker and the top is a lot brighter. I made the sort of top of these different cloud layers a sort of a very light orange, and then I dimmed that down and sort of went through layer by layer by layer by layer, kind of lining it up with more layers of stuff, and then kind of working that through and feathering it in bits like that. There's obviously little bits of where there's like harsher edges to it, but that's how you get it with real clouds. There are harsher edges on some bits of them. They'll still have these sort of jaggedy edges to them, but yeah, there's some harsher bits where there'll be a little bit more of a clean divide between the colors. But yeah, anyways, I will carry on. I will do this detailed shading and the light line and then the gradient maps, and I'll be back to finish off the gradient maps and then wrap up. So yeah. Alright, that's our detailed shading, our light line, and our first gradient map. Now I'm curious here with this gradient map, I'm curious to see, because I had a look at it with the overlay on, or as an overlay layer, as opposed to a soft light layer, which is what I would normally use for our primary gradient map. The overlay layer looks alright. This is it on overlay at the moment. And then, obviously, this is what we have on soft light, which is obviously, it's pretty much the same thing, but just a bit more subtle. For now, we'll stick to soft light. We'll see if we still like that. Now we're gonna want a luminosity. This is gonna make everything a bit dimmer, so we're probably gonna want to keep this actually kind of subtle this time. It's a bit more vivid underneath everything, which is better. Take that, put it on top, then set this to be a color burn. This is gonna make everything a bit more vivid again. And then that should be 5%. How do we feel about the overlay here? The overlay is now very dark. It's very dark with the overlay on. Maybe I'll just use the soft line, just make it more intense, eh? Is that 80%? Obviously an overlay, that's a little much. What if... So on soft light at 80%, that's... Overlay is just, I think, a little too much. It's a bit too dark. I think, yeah, 80% on soft light is maybe a little better. That's alright, I think. Now, I think we might want... I wonder how we're going to want our texture to be here. Because do we want it vivid? Or do we, I mean, intense? Do we want it to be subtle? Because we've got a lot of paint going on in the background here. And typically we don't need the texture as much when we've got a lot of paints going on. It tends to sort of not look perfect. Whoops. Whenever there's a bunch of paints going on in the background. Because you obviously, it's a bit more patterned, the texture, so we don't want it to be too crazy. So How do we feel about a 20% texture? It's very visible on the sun. Yeah, it's quite visible on the sun. It sort of blurs out some of the edges of the paints, which works, I suppose. It kind of blurs them out around here, especially. It lightens up, so I think the 20% texture actually works, because it looks pretty good on the character. Because the white especially comes out a little bit more with this. Yeah. Yeah, I think that works. I think 20% texture is good. Okay. Well, if that's that, then that means that's us. That's us done. So, yeah. That one wasn't too bad. In terms of time, this actually wasn't as long as I thought it'd be, given how long the first chunk took, and how long it took to get back into the swing of things. Because yeah, as I said at the beginning, it has been a while since I actually sat and did one of these, and as a matter of fact, since I've done any drawing in general. So, I'm a bit rusty. But yeah, I got back into the swing of things a lot faster than I was expecting, and yeah, I think that came out pretty well. Yeah, that was an all right one. I'm fairly happy with it. I made obviously some adjustments throughout, and I think ultimately that was definitely for the better. Because yeah, there were some definite problems at the beginning of what we had, and I think the way that all the paints come together here is pretty nice now, actually. Especially yeah, all the painting in the background is pretty nice. All these different things. Yeah, I quite like that. Yeah, I quite like how all the paints came out. That was one of the things which I was sort of struggling with throughout the drawing, was obviously the painting in the background. I knew I was going to have to do it. That was the intention of it, is that I was going to have to do that throughout anyways. But yeah, it's funny that this doesn't really look like a sunset anymore, and actually looks like it's in space, like a nebula or something in the background now, and around a star. Which is, it's funny that you can sort of see it that way fairly easily, even though it is intended to be a sunset. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that the sun is sort of, it looks like it's a little too big. It should be smaller, realistically speaking. The sun is definitely too big. It should be much smaller for it to seem like it's the sun on Earth versus anything else. Because otherwise it doesn't look quite right for that. But it's I think it's more interesting if the sun is big in these things. That's the thing which I tend to do anyways. I tend to make the sun pretty big, and sometimes it's the same thing with the moon. Whenever I draw the moon, I always make the moon enormous, and that's just because I think it looks more dynamic. It looks a little bit more interesting to me, at least, versus a more realistic moon or sun. They're fairly small in reality. But yeah, I think that's enough rambling. I'm happy with that. I think it came out pretty well. And yeah, I don't feel like I have an enormous amount to say after all that. There was some obvious challenges, and I got through them. But yeah. Anyways, I think I will say my outro, and then I'll leave you. So, if you liked the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking it or not. I'd of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you. All I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I've done. If you would like to subscribe, it's the same deal. You can do that or not. I'd of course prefer if you did. Can't make you. You've presumably seen a YouTube video before, so you know where the subscribe button is. I don't need to tell you. It's below the video. But I don't need to tell you. But I have, anyways. I have now. If you would like to suggest something for me to draw in the future, you could leave a comment, politely worded, or not at all. Of course, if you're gonna do it politely. If not, don't do it at all. I don't want to have to sift through a bunch of rude comments. It's annoying to have to do. So yeah. If you choose to watch the next video, I'll see you next time. So with all that said, that is us. I'll say goodbye. Not leave that. So, bye-bye.